Dr. Harlan Briggs grabbed the chart out of Maya Callahan's hands before she could finish speaking. He didn't look at her. He didn't even slow down. "I don't need a nurse telling me how to do my job," he said loud enough for the entire station to hear. "Go check bedpans. That's about your speed." The laughter that followed wasn't from everyone, but it was enough. Maya stood there holding nothing. Her face composed, her eyes quiet. Nobody in that hallway noticed the way her jaw tightened for exactly 1 second. Nobody knew what that stillness actually meant. If this story already has you hooked, please subscribe to our channel and follow along all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Maya Callahan had been at Chicago Memorial for 11 weeks. 11 weeks of early shifts, double shifts, and the kind of invisible labor that keeps a hospital running, while the people taking credit for it walk past without a word. She was 29 years old, 5'6", with dark hair she kept pulled tight, and brown eyes that gave away nothing. Her paperwork said she graduated from a nursing program in Ohio. It said she had 2 years of clinical experience. It said her emergency contact was a woman named Ruth in Dayton, who was listed simply as family friend. What her paperwork did not say would have changed everything. She clocked in at 6:45 that Tuesday morning and went straight to the supply room to restock the trauma cart the overnight crew had left half empty. She worked quietly, methodically, placing each item in its designated slot with a precision that nobody noticed because nobody was watching. That was fine. Being unnoticed was something Maya had spent years learning to do. Dr. Briggs arrived at 7 sharp, which meant the entire floor shifted the moment he walked through those double doors. He was chief of emergency medicine, 52 years old, and he carried the specific arrogance of a man who had never once been told no by anyone whose opinion he respected. He had dark silver hair, a jaw like carved wood, and a way of looking at people that communicated clearly and without apology exactly where he placed them in the hierarchy of importance. Maya ranked somewhere near the bottom. She had figured that out on her 3rd day when she flagged a medication dosage she thought looked wrong on a post-op patient's chart. She'd approached him carefully, professionally, with the chart in hand and the concern stated plainly. Briggs had looked at her the way a man looks at a parking ticket, with irritation at the interruption, not the issue. "The dosage is fine," he'd said. "Stay in your lane." She'd gone back to the chart that night on her break and rechecked the calculation twice. She had been right. She said nothing. She simply made a note and ensured the pharmacy caught it before the next administration window. The patient never knew. Briggs never knew. And Maya filed that moment away in the part of her mind where she stored information she might need later. That was the part of her mind that had kept her alive in places most people couldn't find on a map. By 9 that morning, the ER was running at medium volume. 3 chest pains, a laceration on a 14-year-old who'd caught a bike chain, 2 elderly patients with falls, and a woman in her 60s having what looked like a panic attack, but was almost certainly something cardiac that the intake nurse hadn't caught. Maya caught it. She mentioned it to the attending on-duty Dr. Priya Nair, who was sharp and competent and actually listened when staff spoke to her. Priya ordered the EKG. The result came back in 11 minutes. The woman was having a slow burn NST EMI, a heart attack that had been quietly progressing for hours. "Good catch," Priya said, passing Maya in the hallway. Maya nodded and kept moving. Around her, the morning continued its rhythm. Gurneys rolled. Monitors beeped. Overhead pages called names and room numbers in that flat, endless monotone that became white noise after your first week. Maya moved through all of it with the same calm economy of motion she brought to everything. She didn't rush unless rushing was necessary. She didn't hesitate unless hesitation was the right call. She had been trained at a level most people would never understand to read a situation before acting, to see the full picture before she moved a single piece. It was a discipline that looked to the untrained eye like being slow. Briggs had said as much to one of the residents 2 weeks ago, standing close enough to Maya's station that he clearly didn't care whether she heard. "That one takes about 10 minutes to process a simple instruction," he'd said. "I've seen rocks move faster." The resident had laughed. Maya had continued writing her notes without looking up. What Briggs didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman he was describing had once processed threat assessments in under 3 seconds while rappelling down the side of a building with live gunfire coming from 2 directions. Maya's real file, the one that didn't exist in any civilian database, began when she was 22. She joined the Navy out of college on a fast track that got her to Bud/S inside 18 months. Then through the most demanding pipeline the United States military ran for its special operations candidates. She was not the first woman to get through. She was, however, among a very small number who had done it without accommodation, without modification, and without anyone being able to say even quietly that the bar had been lowered. She had simply met it, and then she had exceeded it. For 5 years after that, she had worked in environments where mistakes were measured in lives, not performance reviews. She had been deployed to places that never made the news doing work that never got a press release. She had extracted people from situations that most planners called unrecoverable. She had operated alone in foreign cities with nothing but a cover identity and a set of skills that had been sharpened by repetition and necessity into something close to instinct. Then something happened. Something she hadn't talked about to anyone, not to Ruth, not to the therapist the VA had offered twice, and she'd declined twice, not to the recruiter who'd tried to bring her back 18 months ago with a better title and better pay. She had said no. She had left. And she had become a nurse because the only version of purpose she could still tolerate was one where the outcome was someone staying alive. She was good at it, better than anyone here realized. At 11:15, she was restocking a medication cart near Bay 4 when she heard the tone shift in the ambulance bay. Not the sound was always noise here, always something, but the quality of the tension that moved through the room when the radio traffic changed pitch. Maya's head came up automatically. She stood still and listened. Multiple GSW inbound. The paramedic's voice came through the radio at the charge nurse's station. We've got 3 critical 2 walking, shooting near the Caldwell projects. ETA 4 minutes. The charge nurse, a heavy-set woman named Donna, who had been doing this for 22 years, immediately went into motion. She called the trauma team overhead. She began clearing bay space. The floor shifted from managed chaos into the higher frequency chaos of a real emergency, and every nurse and doctor on duty responded to their training and moved. Maya moved too. She positioned herself near Trauma Bay 2, already anticipating the triage calculus. Who came through first? Which injury pattern suggested the most immediate intervention need where the bottlenecks would form? It was the same assessment process she ran in any high-stakes situation. The variables were different. The process was identical. The ambulances came through in under 5 minutes. 3 of them lights still going. The paramedics were talking fast hands full, the kind of controlled sprint that meant these weren't salvageable with time situations. They were salvageable right now or not, at all. Male 24, 2 GSWs to the chest, BP is crashing. Female 30, abdomen and left thigh, she's conscious. Male 17 GSW to the shoulder walked in himself, he's stable. The third one, the 17-year-old, Maya clocked him the moment his gurney cleared the bay doors. He was scared in a way that went past pain. His eyes were moving too fast, checking corners, watching the entrance. That wasn't a kid in shock from blood loss. That was a kid who was afraid of what was coming through the door behind him. She filed that away and kept moving. For the next 40 minutes, the ER was everything it was supposed to be in a mass casualty event. Controlled and urgent and deeply precisely human. Maya worked the female GSW patient, 30 years old, name was Denise, according to the paramedic sheet, keeping her pressure up, monitoring the bleed, talking to her in the low, steady voice she used when she needed someone to stay present. I need you to breathe with me, Denise. In through the nose. Slow. You're here. You're right here. Denise grabbed her wrist with one hand and didn't let go for 6 minutes. Priya got in beside Maya, and they worked in near silence, each anticipating what the other needed. That was the version of this job that Maya had come to love, the communication that happened without words, the shared urgency that stripped away hierarchy and left only function. Priya didn't ask where Maya had learned to hold a line like that. She just used it. By noon, Denise was stable and on her way to surgery. The chest patient, the one who'd come in with his BP crashing, had made it to the OR with seconds to spare. The shoulder wound on the 17-year-old had been cleaned, assessed, and was waiting on the attending for discharge paperwork. Maya went to check on him. His name, according to intake, was Marcus Webb. He was sitting on the edge of the exam table with his shoulder wrapped and his face doing something complicated, trying to look like he didn't care while clearly caring enormously. His right knee was moving in a fast, tight bounce. His eyes went to the door every 12 seconds. Maya counted. She pulled up his chart on the tablet and stood beside the table in a way that wasn't confrontational. "How's the pain?" "Fine," Marcus said. "On a scale of 1 to 10. A 3. The wound had been a through and through at close range. She'd seen the entry and exit herself. "Try again," she said, not unkindly. His knee kept moving. 6, he said finally. "I'll get you something for that." She made a note. Didn't move yet. "Do you want me to call someone, family, a friend?" "No." "Okay." She looked at the chart. Then she looked at him, not in the clinical way, not in the assessing a wound way, but in the way she'd been trained to look at people when she needed to understand what was actually happening. "Marcus, is there someone you were worried about coming here?" His jaw tightened. His eyes went to the door again. He didn't answer. She didn't push. She made another note, one that would go to the charge nurse, and quietly through channels that weren't on the official chart, and she stepped out. She was at the medication station pulling his pain management order when Donna appeared at her shoulder. "We've got a situation," Donna said, in the flat voice people used when they were keeping themselves calm by sheer force of will. Security flagged something on the camera feed. 4 men came through the parking structure entrance about 3 minutes ago. They're not checking in. They're not sitting in the waiting room. Maya was already moving. Where are they now? Camera lost them near the east corridor. The east corridor connected directly to the trauma bays. Maya didn't run. Running announced intention. She moved at speed without looking like it, the way she'd been trained to move in environments where being noticed was a liability. She came around the corner near the nurse's station and stopped. She could see 2 of them from where she stood. Big men, wrong clothes for a hospital visit, too layered, too deliberate, the kind of excess fabric that served a specific purpose. One of them was looking at the board on the wall, the one that listed patient names and bay assignments. He was scanning it with the focused attention of someone who already knew what he was looking for. He was looking for Marcus Webb. Maya pulled back around the corner before either man could register her. Her pulse was steady. Her mind was already moving through the architecture of the floor exits, blind spots, the location of every staff member she'd seen in the last 10 minutes, the position of the security desk, the response time she could realistically expect if she pulled an alarm right now. She pulled out her phone and called security directly. "This is Nurse Callahan in the ER. I need your supervisor on the floor right now." 4 unidentified males, possible weapons. "They are moving through the east corridor. I need you to call police, and I need it quiet. Do not announce overhead." She didn't wait for the response to finish. She hung up and started moving again. The second thing she did was go back to Marcus. She pushed through his bay curtain and leaned close. "Marcus, listen to me. There are men in this building looking for you right now. I need you to do exactly what I say." She watched his face go from startled to terrified in about half a second, confirming everything she'd suspected. "Can you walk?" "Yeah." "Then get up. Now, come with me." "Who are you?" he said, and he meant it genuinely because she did not look or sound like a nurse anymore. Not quite. "Someone who isn't going to let you die in a hospital bed," Maya said. "Move." She got him out of the bay and into a utility corridor that ran along the back of the ERR, a route she'd identified in her first week the same way she identified all routes out of habit, and something that was deeper than habit. She positioned Marcus behind a heavy linen cart and told him to stay flat and stay quiet. Then she went back. Because there were still patients in those bays. There were still staff members who didn't know what was walking toward them. And Maya Callahan, whoever else she was, whatever else she'd been, was still the person standing between those people and what was coming. She moved through the corridor with the stillness of someone who had done this before. The 4 men were 30 seconds away. And for the first time in 11 weeks, Maya stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. The first man came around the corner fast, and Maya was already gone. She had pressed herself flat against the wall beside the supply alcove, her breathing, even her body completely still, watching him pass within 3 feet of her without registering her presence. That was the first thing they taught you: not how to fight, not how to shoot, but how to disappear. How to become part of the environment so completely that the human eye simply moved past you the way it moved past furniture. She had spent 5 years making that skill automatic. Right now, it was the only thing keeping this situation from exploding before she was ready. She counted the man's footsteps, counted the pause when he checked the bay curtains, counted the 3 seconds it took him to reach the end of the row and turn back. Then she moved. She came up behind the second man who had posted himself near the corridor junction, arms loose at his sides, eyes moving in the pattern of someone trained to watch an approach. And she did it the way she'd been taught to do it when silence was non-negotiable. Pressure point at the base of the neck, one hand applied with exact force at exact angle. He went down without a sound. She caught him before he hit the floor and guided him against the wall, leaving him seated and unconscious in a way that would look at a quick glance like a man resting. 2 seconds, no noise, she kept moving. The ER was not quiet. It was never quiet. But the particular quality of noise had changed in the last 4 minutes. She could feel it the way you feel a barometric shift before a storm. Staff were moving with slightly too much purpose, too aware of the edges of their own vision, too careful not to look directly at the men who had positioned themselves near the trauma bays. Donna was at the charge station, her face neutral, her hands busy with paperwork. She wasn't actually reading. Good. Donna was smart enough to hold the floor without tipping the situation into panic. Maya needed 3 more minutes, maybe 4. She found the third man near base 6. He was big, not just tall, but constructed the kind of size that came from deliberate effort over years, and he had his right hand inside his jacket in a way that made the shape under the fabric obvious to anyone who knew what they were looking at. He was watching the nursing station. He was also watching the entrance to the trauma corridor, which meant he had been briefed on the layout. Someone had told these men exactly where to go and roughly what they would find when they got there. That meant this wasn't random. This was planned. And planned meant there was someone behind it who had access to hospital information, patient names, bay assignments, possibly more. Maya filed that thought and kept her eyes on the man. She needed him away from the bay. She needed him isolated, and she needed it to happen without drawing attention from his associate, who she could see now had moved to a position near the ambulance entrance, blocking the primary exit route. These men knew what they were doing. They had covered the exits, posted eyes on the approach corridors, and sent one man directly toward Marcus's last known location. Whoever organized this was not an amateur. Neither was she. She walked toward the third man the way the nurse walks toward a patient with purpose, with a chart in hand, with the particular forward-leaning energy of someone who has somewhere to be. She made eye contact when she was 6 feet away and did not drop it. "Sir," she said, "I need you to come with me." He looked at her the way men like him always looked at women who spoke to them in professional environments, like the interruption was a minor irritation he would deal with and dismiss. "I'm waiting for someone," he said. "I understand that, but you've entered a restricted clinical area, and I need to verify your purpose here. It'll take 2 minutes." She gestured toward the utility hallway. "Right through here." He hesitated. That hesitation told her he wasn't sure whether making a scene served his objective better than compliance. She watched him calculate it. She kept her face patient and bureaucratic, the face of someone who would stand here and be annoying until he moved. He moved. The moment they cleared the threshold of the utility hallway, he reached for her, and she was already not where his hand expected her to be. She redirected the grab, used his own forward momentum, and put him against the wall with his arm behind his back at an angle that produced immediate serious pain without doing permanent damage. He made a sound that started as a threat and became something else entirely when she increased the pressure by 10 degrees. "Don't," she said quietly. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. There are police officers on their way into this building right now. You have one decision to make, and you need to make it in the next 5 seconds. You can be here when they arrive, or you can be somewhere else. I strongly recommend somewhere else." She applied the pressure one more time, precise and deliberate. "What's it going to be?" He said something she chose not to repeat. Then his body went slack in the specific way that communicated surrender rather than preparation, and she believed it. She eased back, kept one hand available, and watched him take himself to the ground and stay there. 3 down. 1 left the man at the ambulance entrance, and he was the one she was most concerned about, because he hadn't moved since she'd first spotted him. He wasn't searching, he wasn't watching the bays, he was simply standing at the exit with his back to the wall, which meant his job wasn't to find Marcus. His job was to make sure Marcus didn't leave. That was a different kind of thinking. That was someone who understood how this ended and was prepared to wait for it. Maya came back through the main floor the long way, adding 40 seconds to her route to avoid crossing his sightline. She found Donna at the station and leaned in close enough that nobody else would hear. "Where's hospital security right now?" "Two of them are hide the east stairwell," Donna said without looking up from her paperwork. Her voice was absolutely flat. "Chief is on his radio. Police said 3 minutes." The man at the ambulance entrance cannot know police are coming until they're already on him. If he gets that radio chatter or spots a uniform through the glass before they're in position, he will move inside. You understand what I'm telling you? Donna looked up then. Her eyes were steady. 22 years in an ER had given her a particular quality of composure that not everyone developed the ability to be frightened and functional at the same time. "I'll keep everyone clear of that entrance." "Good." Maya paused. "And Donna, you're doing exactly right. Keep doing it." She moved. The man at the entrance, she was calling him. Four in her head, the way she'd been trained to label targets when names were unavailable, had shifted positions slightly in the past 3 minutes. He was now angled so that he could see both the ambulance bay and the main corridor. Tighter field of vision, but better coverage of both. He'd realized something was off. Not how much, but the animal part of a trained person's brain that monitored environmental threat had registered the change in the floor's energy and told him to adjust. He was good, not good enough. Maya came from the direction he wasn't covering the medication room corridor, which required a badge, in which he presumably couldn't access without drawing attention. She had come through the staff entrance at the far end, moved along the wall in the medication room's blind spot, and emerged at the corner of the corridor behind his sightline. She was 4 feet from him when he turned, not because he saw her, because he felt the air change. That was the thing about men who had been in real situations. They developed a sensitivity to presence that went past sight and sound. He turned with his hand already moving toward his jacket, and Maya was already closing the distance. What happened in the next 4 seconds was not something she could have explained easily to anyone who hadn't lived it. It was a sequence of movements so practiced and so integrated that they had stopped being conscious decisions years ago. She controlled the hand. She controlled the weapon, a compact 9mm, that she cleared from his grip before it cleared the holster. She put him on the ground with a technique that prioritized his cooperation over his injury, and she held the weapon in a 2-hand grip aimed at the floor while he processed what had just occurred. He looked up at her from the ground. His face had gone through about 6 different things in 4 seconds and had settled on something that looked, she thought, almost like disbelief. "Stay down," she said. "Police are 30 seconds out." She heard the doors at the east stairwell open. She heard radio chatter and boots, the specific cadence of officers moving in formation. She heard Donna's voice somewhere behind her, redirecting staff away from the entrance with a calm authority that Maya made a mental note to respect later. She kept the weapon aimed at the floor, her credentials visible on her lanyard, and waited for the officers to enter her sightline so she could identify herself without creating a new problem. "Nurse Callahan." The voice came from behind her, sharp, confused, the kind of shout that meant someone had walked into a situation they hadn't been briefed on. She turned her head just enough to identify the speaker without taking her eyes completely off. It was Dr. Briggs. He was standing at the entrance to the medication corridor, still in his white coat, his face doing something she had never seen it do before. Not the controlled irritation she was accustomed to, not the careful condescension. He looked like a man who had opened a door, expecting a hallway, and found something else entirely on the other side. He was staring at her hands at the weapon at the man on the floor, and he was not moving. "Dr. Briggs," she said. Her voice was exactly the same as it always was. "Please step back inside the medication room and stay there until officers clear this corridor." He didn't move. "Dr. Briggs," sharper now, not loud, but carrying. "Now please," he stepped back. The door closed behind him. The first officer came through the ambulance entrance 30 seconds later. Maya identified herself, clearly named employee ID, what she was holding, and why the location of the 3 other men she had neutralized. She placed the weapon on the floor, stepped back, and kept her hands visible. The officer looked at her for a long moment. He looked at 4 on the floor. He looked back at her. "You're a nurse," he said. "Yes," she said. He didn't say anything else. He just moved to secure the scene, and the next 4 minutes were controlled chaos, more officers coming through, the 3 men she'd taken down being located and restrained, radio traffic filling every corner of the floor. Maya stepped to the side and let it happen around her. That was the other thing they taught you. Once the immediate situation was resolved, you stepped back. You didn't manage the aftermath. You let the systems do their work. She was standing near the medication room, her back against the wall when Donna found her. Donna looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Marcus, utility corridor south end behind the linen cart. He's fine." Donna nodded slowly. Then she said, "Who are you?" Maya considered the question. Not the answer. She knew what the answer was and what parts of it she could give. She considered the question itself, the weight of it, the way Donna was asking it with genuine curiosity rather than fear. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I'm exactly what it says on my badge." Donna looked at her for another long moment. Then she said, "Okay," and went to retrieve Marcus. The debrief with the police took 40 minutes. Maya answered every question directly and completely. She did not elaborate beyond what was asked. When the detective, a compact, precise woman named Rodriguez, who wrote everything down by hand rather than typing, asked her how she had been able to handle 4 armed men without a weapon, Maya said, "Training. Prior to nursing, I had a background in military service." Detective Rodriguez looked up from her notepad. "What kind of military service?" "Specialized," Maya said. Rodriguez held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then she wrote something down and moved to the next question. It was nearly 2 in the afternoon when the police cleared the floor and the ER attempted to resume something approaching normal function. The staff was shaken, the kind of shaken that doesn't show on the surface in professionals, that lives under the movements and the task completion and comes out hours later when someone is alone. Maya knew that rhythm. She'd lived it many times. She moved through the floor, checking on her colleagues the way she checked on patients, not drawing attention to the check, just making sure the important things were holding. She was at the supply station reloading the trauma cart, the one she'd started that morning, 11 hours in an entire different world ago, when she heard footsteps behind her. She knew who it was before she turned. She recognized the cadence. Briggs stopped 2 feet away. He didn't say anything immediately. That alone was notable. "Dr. Briggs," she said, and went back to the cart. "Callahan." A pause, a long one. "Or Shaw, I owe you an apology." She placed a roll of surgical tape in its slot. "You don't need to do that." "I think I do." His voice had lost its architecture. The deliberate authority he carried like a second coat was not present. What remained underneath sounded, she thought, surprisingly like a person. "What you did today, what you were, I didn't see it. I made a judgment, and I was wrong." Maya set down the package she was holding and turned to face him. She didn't fill the silence. She'd learned long ago that silence maintained without discomfort was more powerful than any response. Briggs met her eyes. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent a very long time being certain about things and had just had one of those certainties removed without warning. "Where did you learn to do that?" he said. "Places I can't talk about," she said. "Not unkindly." He nodded, a small nod, the kind that means I understand more than what you said. Then he said, "The patient, Marcus Webb. He's asking for you, so." Maya picked up her supply list and walked toward Marcus's bay. Behind her, she heard Briggs exhale a long, slow breath, the kind that carries a lot of things a person has been holding without realizing it. She didn't look back. Marcus was sitting up when she came in. His shoulder was properly dressed now, his vitals stable, his face carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who has been afraid for a very long time and has just barely tentatively been permitted to stop. He looked at her when she came through the curtain, and what crossed his face was not gratitude exactly. It was something older and more complicated than that. It was the look of someone who has been saved by a person they don't know how to categorize. "You moved me to that corridor," he said. "Yes. Before you knew for certain they were coming." "I knew," she said. He looked at her hands, then he looked at her face. "What did you do to them?" "Security said 3 of them were already down when the police got there." "They're fine," she said. "They'll have sore necks and bruised egos. Nothing permanent." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then why did you even—" He stopped, started again. "You didn't have to put yourself in that. I'm nobody to you." Maya looked at him steadily. 17 years old, scared in a hospital bed with a gunshot wound, and people willing to follow him inside a medical facility to finish what they'd started. Nobody to the world, not nobody to her. "You're a patient," she said. "That's enough." She checked his chart, updated his pain management notes, and told him the detective would be in to speak with him within the hour. She told him what to say and what not to say, and she told him there would be a protective detail on this floor tonight, which she had personally requested through Rodriguez before the debrief ended. Then she asked him one question. "The men who shot you, do you know why?" Marcus looked at the wall for a long time. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." "I figured," she said. "Are they going to try again?" She thought about the fourth man, four on the ground with disbelief on his face. She thought about the planning that had gone into this, the access to patient information, the coordination. She thought about what that meant for what came next. "Not tonight," she said. "I'll make sure of that." She walked out of his bay and back into the floor where the ER was beginning, slowly, stubbornly, the way it always did to pull itself back into function. Monitors beeping, gurneys moving, staff settling into the rhythms that made this place work. The surface of normalcy, reconstructed over the cracks of what had happened. Maya went back to her cart and kept working. But something had changed in the quality of the afternoon. The staff moved around her differently now, not afraid of her, not exactly, but aware of her in a way they hadn't been this morning. Aware that the woman they had dismissed, the quiet nurse who moved slowly and said little and let people speak past her, was something else entirely underneath. She hadn't asked for that. She hadn't wanted it. But she'd known from the moment she made the first decision in that corridor that there was no putting this back in the box. The question now was, what happened with what had come out? And the answer to that question was going to arrive a great deal sooner than she was ready for. The answer arrived at 4:57 in the afternoon in the form of a man Maya had hoped never to see again. She was charting out of the nurse's station when she felt the change not heard. It felt the particular shift in air pressure that happened when someone with real authority entered a space. She looked up before she'd made the conscious decision to look up, and there he was standing at the entrance to the ER corridor, in a dark suit and no tie, his gray hair cut close, his posture carrying the specific economy of a man who had spent decades in rooms where posture communicated rank. He was scanning the floor with the methodical patience of a man who always found what he was looking for. His eyes landed on Maya. Commander Vincent LaRue, retired technically. Technically, he had been her handler for the last 18 months of her operational career. He had been the voice in her earpiece in a burned building in Mosul, calm as a math teacher talking her through a situation that shouldn't have had a survivable outcome. He had been the man who handed her the separation paperwork with one hand and a business card with the other and said, "When you're done being a nurse," and she had taken the paperwork and given back the card. She had not seen him in 14 months. He crossed the floor without hurrying and stopped on the other side of the counter. He looked at her badge, then at her face. Then he said very quietly, "Hell of a Tuesday." "Commander," she said. "Retired," he said. "Right." He put both hands on the counter and leaned forward slightly. "Walk with me. I'm on shift." Maya. Not the commander voice, something else. Something closer to the voice he'd used exactly once in a debriefing room in Stuttgart after an operation that had gone sideways in ways neither of them had anticipated when he'd looked at her across a conference table and said with uncharacteristic directness that he was sorry for what she'd been asked to carry. "Walk with me. 5 minutes." She told Donna she was taking a break. Donna, who had been watching the exchange from 6 feet away, with the focused attention of a woman who missed nothing, nodded once without asking questions. They went to the consultation room at the end of the east corridor. Maya closed the door. LaRue stood with his back to the window and his arms crossed, and for a moment neither of them said anything, and it was the kind of silence that has a history inside it. "How did you know?" she said. "Police scanner and a name that shouldn't have appeared on a civilian incident report," he said. "Took me about 40 minutes to get here from O'Hare." He studied her face. "You're not surprised I'm here?" "No." "Are you angry?" She considered that. "Not yet. Ask me again in 5 minutes." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "The 4 men you neutralized today, you know who sent them?" "I know what I guessed." "Your guess is correct. The man they were sent to kill, Marcus Webb, witnessed a transaction 3 nights ago in the Caldwell district. The people he witnessed are connected to a network we have been building a case on for 14 months. Federal level, DOJ is involved. Marcus Webb is not just a witness, Maya. He is the only living witness. Two others are already dead. The temperature in the room didn't change. Maya felt the temperature in the room change. He's 17, she said. I know. He came in here with a gunshot wound, and 4 men followed him inside a hospital to finish it. I know. And you've known about this network for 14 months, and a 17-year-old kid is still the only card you're holding. LaRue held her gaze without flinching. That was one thing she had always respected about him. He didn't retreat from accountability. He stood inside it. This investigation has had complications. Resources were diverted. There were decisions made above my level that I disagreed with and documented my disagreement with. None of that changes the current situation, which is that Marcus Webb is alive right now because of what you did today, and the people who sent those 4 men have not stopped. They will try again. Maya was quiet for a moment. Outside the door, she could hear the ER floor monitors, voices the low, persistent hum of a place that never fully stopped moving. What do you want from me? She said. Tonight, nothing beyond what you've already done. There will be a federal protective detail on Marcus Webb's room within the hour. He'll be moved to a secure location when he's medically cleared. LaRue paused. But there's more to this than tonight. And you already know what I'm going to say next. Don't. Maya. I left, she said. Her voice was level, but it had something underneath it, the way a river looks calm from a bridge, and you cannot see the current from where you're standing. I made that decision for reasons that didn't disappear because of what happened today. I am a nurse. This is where I chose to be. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. I'm asking you to consult. One case, Marcus Webb, and the people who sent those men today. You're already inside it. You were inside it the moment you moved him to that utility corridor. I'm not asking you to be something you were. I'm asking you to help us finish something that matters. The silence stretched. Then Maya said, who else knows I'm here? My real file. LaRue's expression shifted just slightly, just enough. That's a more complicated question than it was yesterday. What does that mean? It means that what happened today will generate a report. The report will generate attention. There are people in certain agencies who will see a name attached to an incident at Chicago Memorial and cross-reference it with files that are supposed to be sealed. He met her eyes. You may not have the luxury of staying quiet regardless of what you decide. Maya absorbed that. She thought about the morning, the supply cart, the medication rounds, Priya saying good catch, the particular small satisfaction of doing work that mattered in a way nobody needed to know about. She thought about the version of herself she had been constructing, here piece by piece, shift by shift. She thought about the look on Marcus Webb's face when he'd asked why she'd bothered. You're a patient. That's enough. Give me the night, she said. You have it. And I want your word that if I say no, if I look at what you're bringing me, and I say no, that's the end of it. LaRue nodded. You have my word. She opened the door and went back to the floor. At 6:15, she was doing her final medication rounds when she heard raised voices from the direction of Marcus's bay. Not the distressed voices of a medical situation, the sharp-edged voices of a confrontation. She turned her head, clocked the direction, and moved without breaking into a run. She pushed through the curtain and found 2 men she didn't recognize, standing over Marcus's bed. Not the rough physicality of the earlier attackers. These men were suits, identification visible, the studied authority of federal badges. One of them was speaking to Marcus in the clipped cadence of an official who had decided the conversation's parameters before it began. We need you to come with us now, the man was saying. Your safety cannot be guaranteed in this location. Marcus looked at the man, then he looked at Maya. His eyes said everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the fundamental question of who he was supposed to trust when everyone who'd shown up so far wanted something from him. Gentlemen, Maya said from the curtain. Both men turned. She kept her voice even and professional and absolutely immovable. This patient is under my care and he has not been medically cleared for transfer. Whatever credentials you're carrying, they don't supersede his clinical status. If you'd like to discuss the timeline for his transfer, I'll connect you with his attending physician. Until then, he stays. The taller of the 2 men looked at her with the particular expression of someone who was accustomed to hospital staff stepping aside when federal identification appeared. Ma'am, this is a matter of, I know what it's a matter of, she said, and I'm telling you he stays until he's cleared. That's not negotiable, and it's not personal. She held the taller man's gaze until he looked away. A small thing, a 3-second thing, but it communicated everything that needed to be communicated. I'll let the attending know you're here, or here, Ato. She stepped back through the curtain, walked to the nurse's station, and picked up the phone. She called Priya first because Priya was the attending, and because Priya would back her without needing the full context. Then she called the number LaRue had given her and said, "Your people showed up before the protective detail was in place, and they upset my patient. Fix it." There was a pause on the other end. Then LaRue said, "I'm sorry, that was not coordinated." "I noticed," she said, and hung up. Priya arrived in 4 minutes. She assessed Marcus, updated his chart, and told the federal agents with clinical precision exactly what his transfer window would be and what conditions would need to be met before she would sign off on his movement. The taller agent looked like he wanted to argue. Priya's expression suggested this would be an unproductive endeavor. He didn't argue. When they were gone, Maya went back to Marcus one more time. He looked at her from the bed. "Are those the good guys or the bad guys?" "Complicated questions," she said. "You trusted the woman in the statue more than those two." She looked at him. 17 years old, and he was reading rooms with that kind of precision. She thought about what that kind of perception cost a person to develop and at what age and in what circumstances. "You're perceptive," she said. "I grew up in Caldwell," he said like that explained it. And it did. She sat down in the chair beside his bed, something she almost never did, because sitting meant staying, and staying meant something, and she looked at him directly. "Marcus, what you saw 3 nights ago, do you know who those people were?" He was quiet for a long time. The monitor above his bed beeped steadily. Someone in the next bay was talking to a family member in a low voice. The ER floor continued its permanent motion around them. "One of them," he said finally. "I knew one of them, not by name, but I'd seen him before. He comes around the Caldwell projects. Drives a white SUV. People move when he comes around. Not scared move. Respect move. Like he owns something. Would you recognize him again?" Marcus looked at his hands. "Already told that detective lady. Rodriguez. I already told her." A pause. "She said it was enough. Said if I was willing to say that in front of a judge, it was enough to move the whole case forward." He looked up at Maya. "Is that true, or is that what they say?" "Detective Rodriguez is good at her job," Maya said. "And yes, a credible eyewitness who can place a known figure at the scene of a transaction. If your account is solid, that matters." "My account is solid," he said with a sharpness that came from somewhere deep and certain. "I know what I saw. I've been knowing since it happened. I was scared to say it, not confused about it." Something in Maya's chest shifted. She recognized that particular brand of courage, the kind that lived not in the absence of fear, but directly alongside it. She had carried it herself for 5 years. She knew its weight. "Then say it," she said. "When they put you in front of the right people, say exactly that, exactly the way you just said it to me." Marcus held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once slowly, the way a person nods when they've made a decision they intend to keep. Maya stood up. She was almost to the curtain when he said her name. Not Nurse Callahan, just her first name, which she hadn't told him, which meant he'd gotten it from somewhere, from Donna, or a badge reading, or the way nurses called to each other across the floor. "Maya," he said. She turned. "Those guys who came today, they're going to find out it didn't work. And then they're going to try something else." He wasn't asking. He was stating it with the flat clarity of someone who understood how the world he'd grown up in operated. "Yes," she said, "they will. You're going to be here." She thought about LaRue's voice in the consultation room. She thought about the words she'd asked for, "Give me the night," and what she already knew the morning would bring. She thought about the supply card and the medication rounds and the version of herself she'd been building here for 11 weeks. "Yes," she said, "I'll be here." She went back to the floor and finished her shift. At 8:45, 15 minutes before her shift was supposed to end, Donna appeared at her elbow with an expression that Maya had already learned to categorize as specifically bad news, wearing a professionally neutral face. "There's someone at the main entrance asking for you," Donna said. "Not police, not federal. He said to tell you he drove from St. Louis and he isn't leaving until he talks to you. Maya went still. Did he give a name? He said you'd know him by the description. Donna paused. He said to tell you he has a scar through his left eyebrow and he still owes you $20 from 2019. The floor did not shift under Maya's feet because Maya did not allow floors to shift under her feet. But something moved in her chest that she couldn't immediately name, something between recognition and dread, and the particular ache of a past that refuses to stay past. Only one person in the world matched that description. Sergeant First Class Danny Kowalski, former SEAL, former teammate. The man who had been on her left side in Mosul and her right side in 3 operations she still couldn't name aloud in civilian company. The man she had not spoken to in 14 months because the last conversation they'd had ended with her walking out of a parking lot in Arlington, Virginia, and him calling after her with words she'd chosen deliberately not to hear. Danny Kowalski did not do things without reason. He did not drive from St. Louis without reason. And the fact that he was here tonight of all nights told her with the certainty of someone who understood how intelligence worked that her location was not a secret anymore. Whatever the morning was going to bring it had arrived early. She straightened her badge, pushed her hair back, and walked toward the main entrance. Danny Kowalski looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him, which was the most unsettling thing about seeing him. Same width across the shoulders, same deliberate stillness he carried in every environment, the way other men carried wallets. Same scar cutting clean through his left eyebrow from a piece of shrapnel outside Kandahar in 2018 that had missed his eye by 4 millimeters, and that he had described at the time with blood running down his face as a minor inconvenience. He was leaning against the wall beside the main entrance with his hands in his jacket pockets. And when Maya came through the corridor door, he straightened up and looked at her with an expression that was trying to be neutral and wasn't quite making it. Hey, he said. You drove from St. Louis, she said. 5.5 hours. Traffic was ugly around Springfield. He studied her face the way he'd always studied situations, completely quickly without making it obvious that he was doing it. You look the same. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. He pushed off the wall. Can we sit somewhere? They found a family consultation room 2 corridors over. Not the one she'd used with LaRue, a different one smaller with 2 chairs and a table and a box of tissues. Nobody had replaced in what looked like several weeks. Maya sat. Danny remained standing for a moment, then seemed to decide that standing communicated something he didn't intend and sat across from her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. They had that capacity together, the ability to occupy silence without filling it, a thing that came from years of operating in environments where sound had consequences. It had always been one of the things she trusted most about him. Right now, it was making her more uneasy, not less, because Danny Kowalski had driven 5.5 hours, and the silence meant he was choosing his words. And Danny only chose his words when what he had to say was serious enough to require it. Talk, she said. He put both forearms on the table. How much do you know about what's happening with the Webb case? Marcus Webb is a material witness in a 14-month federal investigation. The men who came in today were sent to prevent him from testifying. LaRue briefed me this afternoon. Danny's expression shifted. LaRue was here. He was on a flight from O'Hare before the police scanner traffic finished. She watched Danny's face. That doesn't surprise you. No, he exhaled. Maya, what LaRue told you about the investigation, how much of it was context and how much of it was recruitment. She held his gaze. He asked me to consult. I told him to give me the night. Danny was quiet for 3 seconds, which on his internal clock was a long time. There's something LaRue didn't tell you, or if he did, he didn't tell you all of it. The room felt smaller suddenly. Go ahead. The network Marcus Webb witnessed the organization running those transactions in Caldwell. The DOJ's been building a case against them for 14 months, like LaRue said. What LaRue didn't say is that the case nearly collapsed 8 months ago because of a leak. Someone inside the investigative structure was feeding information out. One agent ended up dead, another one went into protective custody. The investigation was restructured under a completely different chain of command. He paused. The new chain of command includes a deputy director named Hargrove, Victor Hargrove. The name landed and Maya felt it land. She kept her face still. I know that name. I thought you might. Victor Hargrove had been attached to a joint task force operation Maya had participated in during her third deployment year. She had flagged a concern about his conduct during an interrogation to her chain of command and been told in language that left no room for interpretation that the flag would not be going into any official record. She had filed it herself through back channels with a legal advocate she'd trusted. She did not know what had happened to that filing after she left. "He's running the Webb investigation now," she said. "He's the one who approved the use of the Webb identification in the case structure. His name is on the document that put Marcus Webb into the system as a material witness under active surveillance." Danny leaned forward. "Maya, when those men walked into this hospital today, someone told them Marcus Webb was here. Someone told them what bay he was in. That information was not publicly available." The silence this time was a different quality entirely. "The leak didn't close," she said. "The leak moved," Danny said, "and it moved up." She sat with that for 10 seconds, organized it, ran the implications forward the way she'd been trained to run threat assessments, not just the immediate problem, but the branches off it, the second and third order consequences. Marcus Webb was a 17-year-old kid who had seen the wrong thing at the wrong time, and the machinery that was supposed to protect him had a hole in it that went all the way up to the man currently in charge of his protection. "Does LaRue know?" she said. "LaRue suspects. He doesn't have proof. That's part of why he's here. He's trying to work it from the outside without tipping Hargrove." Danny's jaw tightened. "The other part of why he's here is you. Maya, your name is in the incident report from today. Your real name. Your full service record is one database query away from anyone with the right clearance, and Hargrove has the right clearance. So my cover is blown regardless?" "Within certain circles, yes, as of about 3 hours ago." He held her eyes. "I drove from St. Louis because I needed to tell you that to your face. Not over a phone, not in a text, to your face, so you could make whatever decision you're going to make with all the information in front of you." She looked at him, at the scar through his eyebrow, at the lines around his eyes that were a little deeper than the last time she'd seen them, at the fundamental steadiness of a man she had trusted with her life on 4 continents and had walked away from anyway, not because the trust had broken, but because staying in that world had been breaking something else. "Why did you leave St. Louis?" she said. "Not why did you come here, why did you leave there?" His expression moved through something quickly. "I've been working a private security contract for a logistics company. Boring, safe, nothing that matters." He paused. "I've been bored out of my mind for 8 months. Danny, and I got a call from a mutual contact saying you were ID'd in a federal incident report and Hargrove's people were going to have your name within the hour. So I got in my truck." He said it simply the way he said most things without ornamentation. "That's all." That was not all. She had known this man long enough to know what that was not all meant and to know that now was not the time to open that door. She filed it in the same place she filed everything that required more time than the current situation allowed. "LaRue wants me to consult," she said. "If the investigation is compromised from inside, consulting through LaRue's structure puts Marcus Webb at more risk, not less." "Correct. Which means whatever I do, it has to happen outside that structure." "Also correct." Danny's expression held something that was almost careful. "I may have some thoughts about that." "Of course you do. You want to hear them." "Not yet." She stood up. "I need to check on my patient first." He looked up at her. "You're still thinking of yourself as his nurse." "I am his nurse," she said. "Everything else is in addition to that, not instead of it." She went back to the floor. Marcus's bay was quiet, the federal protective detail properly coordinated. Now 2 officers with credentials she verified personally posted at the corridor entrance. She checked his vitals, updated his chart, and sat with him for 3 minutes while he told her he wasn't going to be able to sleep. "That's normal," she said. "Your nervous system has been running on adrenaline for about 12 hours. It needs time to come down." "Is it always like that?" "The after, when the thing is over and your body doesn't know it yet." She thought about the question honestly. "For a while, it gets better. How long is a while?" She thought about the first 3 months after she'd separated from the service. The way she'd wake up at 3 in the morning with her heart already at 160 and no threat in the room. Just the memory of threat, just her nervous system running drills on its own schedule without asking her permission. She thought about the runs she'd taken at 4 in the morning because lying still had felt worse than moving. She thought about the slow, grinding work of teaching her body that the war was over, at least for her, at least for now. Different for everyone, she said, but it gets better. He looked at her. You know from experience. I know from experience. He was quiet for a moment, then, those men today, the ones you stopped, you weren't scared. I was focused, she said. Those aren't the same thing. At 9:45, she found LaRue in the corridor outside the consultation room, which told her he had not gone far. He looked at her with the expression of a man who had been waiting and had the patience for it. Kowalski reached you, he said. It wasn't a question. He did. What did he tell you, Bam? Enough, she said. LaRue, Victor Hargrove. I need you to tell me how much of what you know about the leak you have kept from him. LaRue's face went very still. It was the stillness of a man deciding how much truth the situation required. She had seen that calculation on his face exactly once before in Stuttgart at the end of that debriefing, and she had respected that he'd resolved it, both times in the direction of honesty. Everything he said, I have told Hargrove nothing I didn't have to. I have kept my internal assessment of the leak situation entirely outside the official reporting structure. Because you think it's him. Because I cannot yet prove it isn't. She breathed out slowly. Okay, then here's what I need from you. Marcus Webb cannot be moved through any channel that Hargrove has visibility into. When Priya clears him for transfer, that movement needs to happen through a chain you control completely and Hargrove has no access to. That is a significant operational request. I'm aware. It would require me to effectively run a parallel protective structure outside the official. I know what it requires, she said. Can you do it? He held her gaze for a long moment. Yes. Then do it. She paused. And LaRue, I'll consult, but I'm doing it my way with my own structure, and I'll bring you what I find. I don't report to Hargrove. I don't report to anyone above you. If that's not acceptable, say so now. That's acceptable, he said without hesitating. She went back to Danny. He was still in the consultation room, sitting exactly where she'd left him, a paper cup of coffee in front of him that he'd gotten from somewhere and had clearly not touched. She sat down across from him and put both hands flat on the table. Tell me your thoughts, she said. He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. There's a man named Garrett Solis, 43 years old, runs legitimate real estate holdings as front operations for what the DOJ's been calling the Caldwell Network. He's the one Marcus saw 3 nights ago. Not in person, Solis doesn't do personal appearances at transactions. But Marcus can place him at the site through a vehicle and a face, and that's apparently enough. He looked at the table, then back at her. Solis has a second layer of operation nobody's cracked yet. The DOJ knows the front. They know the transactions. They don't know the distribution network below Solis, which is where the real infrastructure lives. Without that piece, even if Marcus testifies, and Solis goes down, the network rebuilds under new management inside of 6 months. So Marcus testifying is necessary, but not sufficient. Right. The secondary network is the piece that actually ends this. Martin, he paused. I know someone who might have access to that layer. A contact I built during the St. Louis contract, private, no government affiliation, no connection to Hargrove or the official investigation. She's been tracking Solis's financial movements independently for about 5 months because one of the front operations attempted to buy into a property her firm manages. Motivated by business, not justice. The best sources always are. Danny finally picked up the coffee cup. She won't talk to a federal agent. She will talk to me. And if what she has maps onto what the DOJ doesn't have, we can build the full picture outside of Hargrove's visibility and bring it in clean when the time is right. Maya looked at him, at the steadiness of him, the careful precision of the way he'd laid this out the 5.5 hours from street. Lewis that he'd called, nothing but telling her to her face what she needed to know, and she understood with the clarity she always had about things that mattered that Danny Kowalski hadn't driven here because of a phone call from a mutual contact. She wasn't going to say that. Not tonight. Not yet. When can you meet your contact? She said. Tomorrow morning if I call her tonight. Then call her tonight. He nodded. He started to say something and then didn't. She recognized that too, the edited sentence, the thing that started and stopped, because the moment wasn't right for it. She understood it because she did it herself more than she'd ever admit. At 10:20, she was at the nurse's station finishing her charts when Briggs appeared beside her. She had not spoken to him since the exchange by the supply cart, and she had given him space because some things needed space to become real before they could be useful. He stood next to her for a moment without speaking, which was so unlike him that several members of the nursing staff visibly noticed and made small adjustments. A slight repositioning. A glance exchanged the involuntary attention people give to something that doesn't fit the pattern they expect. "I pulled your employment file today," he said finally. She didn't stop writing. "I know. It's sparse." "Yes. The military section references specialized service and lists your discharge as honorable and your clearance as..." He stopped. "It says your clearance level is classified." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "How many other hospitals have you worked in?" She finished her notation and set down the pen. "This is the first." He processed that. "So everything you built here, the clinical skill, the patient instinct, that was all new." "The instinct isn't new," she said. "The application of it changed." He was quiet again. She could hear him working through something, rearranging pieces of a picture he'd been looking at from the wrong angle for 11 weeks. "The medication dosage," he said. "Week 3, the post-op patient." She said nothing. "That was you," he said. "The pharmacy catch." She said nothing. He exhaled through his nose. "I owe you more than one apology." "Dr. Briggs," she said, "what I need from you right now is not an apology. What I need is for the clinical environment on this floor to hold steady for the next 24 hours. Can you do that?" He looked at her. Something in his face had permanently changed since this morning. Some arrangement of features that had previously communicated authority and distance had shifted into something more honest, more human, and more useful. "Yes," he said, "I can do that." "Then that's what matters," she said, and picked up her pen. At 11:15, she was on her way to check Marcus one final time before signing off when Rodriguez appeared at the corridor entrance. The detective looked like she had been awake for 20 hours, which she probably had, and she moved with the specific efficiency of someone who had decided sleep was a problem to solve later. She stopped beside Maya and spoke quietly. "Solis's people know the 4 men failed," Rodriguez said. "We've had 2 additional individuals identified on camera in the hospital parking structure in the last hour. They left when the uniform presence increased, but they left a car. We're running plates now." Maya processed the timeline. "So the second attempt is already in planning?" "We believe so. That's why I'm here." Rodriguez looked at her directly. The detective had the eyes of someone who had been lied to often enough that she developed a permanent and specific quality of attention, the kind that made most people uncomfortable and that Maya found refreshing. "I've looked at your incident report from today, Nurse Callahan. I've looked at it very carefully. There are things in it that don't add up to a nursing background from Ohio." Maya met her eyes. "What would you like to know?" "Everything," Rodriguez said. "But I'll start with this. When this isn't over, when whoever sent those men today sends the next wave, and they will, are you going to be here?" Maya thought about Marcus's face when he'd asked the same question in different words. She thought about Danny in the consultation room with untouched coffee and 5.5 hours of highway behind him. She thought about LaRue's word, which she trusted, and Hargrove's name, which she didn't. She thought about the supply cart this morning and the life she'd been building, piece by careful piece in this place, that had started to feel improbably and against all expectation, like something close to home. "Yes," she said, "I'll be here." Rodriguez studied her for one more moment. Then she nodded, not the nod of someone satisfied, but the nod of someone who had measured a thing and found it sufficient. She put her card on the counter. "My direct line, not the precinct line, mine." She paused. "Get some sleep tonight, Nurse Callahan. Tomorrow is going to be longer than today." She left. Maya looked at the card. She picked it up and put it in her pocket. She went to check on Marcus. He was asleep. Finally, genuinely asleep, his breathing slow and even his face carrying none of the tight vigilance it had held all day. She stood at the curtain and looked at him for a moment, and something moved through her chest that she didn't try to name. She just let it be there. Then she went to finish her shift and to get ready for what was coming. Because Rodriguez was right. Tomorrow would be longer than today. And Maya Callahan, nurse operative, whatever she was now in the space between those two things, was already planning every step of it. She slept 4 hours. That was enough. It had always been enough. She was back at Chicago Memorial by 6:15 Wednesday morning, 40 minutes before her shift started, because she needed those 40 minutes for things that had nothing to do with medication carts or patient charts. She found Danny in the parking structure, sitting in his truck with 2 coffees and his phone face down on the dashboard, which meant the call with his contact had happened, and the news was significant enough that he decided to hold it until he could say it in person. She got in the passenger side and took the coffee. Her name is Cecile Marsh, Danny said. She runs a commercial property management firm in the South Loop. Solis's network tried to acquire one of her buildings 14 months ago using 3 layers of shell companies. She blocked it, hired her own forensic accountant, and spent the next year quietly mapping the financial structure underneath Solis's legitimate holdings. He picked up his own cup. She has the secondary network Maya, the full distribution architecture, routing personnel transaction flow. Everything the DOJ has been missing. Maya absorbed that. Why hasn't she taken it to federal authorities? Because the first time she tried, 11 months ago, she walked into a field office and the agent who took her intake information was dead inside a week. His voice was flat but not without weight. She connected those dots and went silent. The dead agent, the one LaRue had mentioned, the investigation's first casualty 8 months before the restructure. The timeline matched. She's been sitting on this alone for almost a year, Maya said. Scared and furious in equal measure, Danny said. She'll talk to me. She won't put anything in writing and she won't go near a federal office. But she'll talk. He paused. She wants to meet this morning. She wants to meet you. Maya looked at him. She knows about me. I told her enough. She did the rest herself. She's resourceful. He picked up his phone. She said, and I'm quoting directly, that she wants to look the woman who took down 4 armed men in an ER in the face before she trusts her with 11 months of her life's work. Fair, Maya said. They drove to a diner in Pilsen at 7 in the morning because Cecile Marsh had chosen it and Cecile Marsh had earned the right to choose. She was already there when they arrived, a compact woman in her late 40s with natural gray at her temples and the precise, watchful energy of someone who had been careful for a very long time and had gotten good at it. She looked at Maya the moment she walked through the door and did not look away. Maya looked back with the same directness. They sat. Cecile ordered nothing. She put a leather portfolio on the table and kept both hands on top of it. You're not what I expected, Cecile said to Maya. What did you expect? Someone who looked like what they'd done. She studied her. You look like a nurse. That's because I am one, Maya said. Something in Cecile's posture shifted. Not relaxed exactly, but recalibrated. Kowalski says the investigation has a leak at the deputy director level. We believe so. Victor Hargrove. Cecile said the name like she'd been waiting to say it for a long time. He's connected to Solis. Not directly, it's 2 layers removed through a financial arrangement that involves a real estate holding in Scottsdale and a consulting firm in Delaware. It's in here. She pressed her hands flatter on the portfolio. All of it. Every routing document, every transaction record, every shell company. 11 months. The diner was quiet around them. Maya looked at the portfolio and then at Cecile. You've been carrying this alone. Yes. You could have been found. Yes. Cecile's jaw tightened. I know what that would have meant. I chose to keep going anyway. She paused. I watched a federal agent die because he tried to do the right thing through the right channels, and someone in those channels made a phone call. I was not going to do the same thing. Her eyes went to Maya. So I waited. I kept building the case, and I waited for someone I could trust who was not inside that structure. Maya thought about the weight of that 11 months of work, held alone the specific courage of a private citizen who had connected the worst possible dots and kept moving forward anyway. She thought about Marcus Webb, 17 years old, who had seen something he couldn't unsee and refused to say he wasn't certain about it. She thought about the particular quality of ordinary people who decided without training and without infrastructure that they were not going to look away. I'll take it to LaRue directly, Maya said. He's outside Hargrove's chain. He has the structure to act on this without it going through compromised channels. And Rodriguez at CP? D, she gets a parallel copy that goes into the department's own investigative record, independent of the federal structure entirely. 2 channels, 2 independent records. Hargrove can't suppress both. Cecile was quiet for a moment. If he finds out before it's locked in, he won't, Danny said. He said it quietly and with the specific certainty of someone who has planned around worse variables than this one. Cecile looked at him, then she looked at Maya again. Then she picked up the portfolio and set it across the table. Maya took it. They were back in Danny's truck by 8:15. Maya called Rodriguez, first the direct line, not the precinct, and told her to meet them at a location of Rodriguez's choosing that had no connection to the federal investigation structure. Rodriguez said a coffee shop in Wicker Park and gave an address and said 20 minutes. Maya said they'd be there in 25. She called LaRue on the way. He answered on the first ring, which told her he hadn't slept either. She told him what she had, where it came from, and what she needed him to do with it. The silence on his end lasted 4 seconds. Then he said, the Hargrove connection. Do you have documentation? 11 months of it. Another silence. Longer this time. Maya, if this is what you're saying it is, it's what I'm saying it is, then this ends careers. This ends more than careers. I know, she said. That's why it needs to happen right and fast. How quickly can you get to Chicago? I'm already in Chicago, he said. I haven't checked out of my hotel. She almost smiled. Meet Rodriguez. I'll text you the address. The meeting at the coffee shop in Wicker Park lasted 90 minutes. Rodriguez sat across from LaRue with Cecile's documentation between them and read with the focused intensity of a detective who was already building the structure of what came next. She asked 4 questions during the reading. Each one was precise and went directly to the evidentiary strength of a specific piece. LaRue answered 2 of them. Maya answered 1. Cecile answered the last one with the exact reference page and the forensic accountant's notation that supported it. When Rodriguez finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling for approximately 5 seconds. Then she looked at Maya. Hargrove is going to know something moved against him the moment we start making calls, Rodriguez said. He has sources inside CPD, not deep, but enough. Once this goes into our system, the clock starts. How long do you need before it's locked in? Maya said. If I can get this to my chief and to the state's attorney's office in the next 3 hours, we can have a filing that Hargrove cannot suppress regardless of his federal standing. Rodriguez looked at LaRue. Your end? There is an inspector general mechanism within the agency that operates independently of the operational chain, LaRue said. I have a direct contact there. A simultaneous filing through that channel cross-referenced with CPDs creates a record that cannot be quietly buried. He paused. I should have moved through that channel 8 months ago. Yes, Maya said. Not unkindly. You should have. He accepted that without defending himself. She respected it. Rodriguez gathered the documents with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood what she was holding. She looked at Cecile. You're going to need to be somewhere safe today. Not your office, not your home. I know a place, Cecile said. Her voice was steady. She'd been steady throughout, Maya noticed, not the brittle steadiness of someone suppressing fear, but the real steadiness of someone who has already made peace with the risk and is simply moving through what comes next. I'll have someone with you, Danny said to Cecile. Cecile looked at him. Are you offering? Unless you'd rather handle it alone. The corner of Cecile's mouth moved. I've been handling things alone for 11 months. I think I can manage the company. Maya was back at Chicago Memorial by 10:15. She went straight to Marcus's bay. He was awake sitting up, watching the door with the low-level vigilance that had become his baseline. When he saw Maya, the vigilance dropped 1 register, not gone, but reduced. She had learned in 36 hours that this was what passed for relaxation in Marcus Webb's current emotional vocabulary, and she was choosing to count it. Quiet night, she asked. Protective detail guys changed shifts twice, he said. Made me nervous both times. Then I realized if something was actually wrong, I'd probably know from the noise and not the shift change. Good reasoning, she said. Learn from the best. He watched her check his chart. Something happened this morning. She looked up. What makes you say that? You came in at 10:15, your shift starts at 7. You don't skip 2 hours of your shift unless something matters more. He met her eyes. Did it work, whatever you were doing? She thought about Cecile's portfolio, Rodriguez's 3-hour window, LaRue's inspector, general contact. The simultaneous filings that were right now building a structure that Hargrove could not collapse from inside. It's working, she said. It's not done, but it's working. Marcus held her gaze for a moment. Then something released in his face, not completely, not all at once, but enough. Enough for his shoulders to drop a centimeter and his jaw to unclench and his eyes to lose just briefly the watchfulness that had been living in them since the moment she'd first noticed him checking the corners. My mom wants to come, he said. They wouldn't let her last night. Security protocols. I'll talk to the protective detail about visitation, she said. She can be here. His face did something she wasn't prepared for. Not tears, he held those back. She could see the exact effort of it, the way his throat worked. Just an opening, a brief unguarded moment where she could see directly into what this had cost him. What being 17 and shot and alone in a hospital bed and afraid for 36 hours actually looked like on the inside. He looked for just a second exactly his age. Thank you, he said. His voice was rough. For all of it. She didn't deflect it. She let it land and said, "You're welcome," and meant it. At 12:40 in the afternoon, Rodriguez called. Maya stepped into the utility corridor, the same one where she'd hidden Marcus 36 hours ago, and listened. The state's attorney's office received the filing at 11:50, Rodriguez said. The IG filing through LaRue's channel was logged at 12:08. Both are now in the official record. A beat. Hargrove was notified of an administrative review of his conduct at 12:30. He has been temporarily suspended from operational authority, pending investigation. Maya put one hand against the wall, not for support, just to feel something solid. Marcus Webb, she said, protective detail stays, testifies under a structure that now bypasses Hargrove entirely. His testimony, combined with Cecile Marsh's documentation, gives the DOJ everything they need to proceed against Solis with a clean chain of evidence. Rodriguez paused. Solis's people will know by end of day that the secondary network is exposed. The incentive to silence Marcus drops significantly when the information he's carrying is already in the official record. Significantly, but not completely. No, Rodriguez said, not completely, but the calculus changes. It changes a lot. Another pause. Nurse Callahan, what you did, the Marsh contact, the parallel filing structure, the speed of it, that was not nursing. No, Maya agreed, it wasn't. I'm not going to ask what it was, but I want you to know that it made the difference between this case surviving and this case disappearing. Rodriguez's voice was direct and unhurried. That matters. Maya thought about what she'd said to Marcus. You're a patient, that's enough. She thought about the supply card on Tuesday morning, the medication rounds, the 11 weeks of quiet invisibility that had been. She understood now not a retreat from who she was, but an addition to it, another layer, another way of being useful in a world that needed both kinds of work. Thank you, detective, she said. She went back to the floor. At 2 in the afternoon, Danny found her at the nurse's station. He leaned against the counter with his arms crossed and looked at her with the specific expression of a man who had a question he wasn't sure how to ask. Cecile is settled, he said. Safe location checked twice. Good. LaRue wants a debrief tomorrow. He used the word formal, which means he's thinking about a longer arrangement. I know what he's thinking about. What are you going to tell him? She looked at the board behind the station, patient names, bay assignments, the constant repopulation of need that was this floor's permanent condition. She thought about Priya saying good catch and meaning it. She thought about Donna holding the floor during the worst 30 minutes of Tuesday without breaking. She thought about the cardiac patient she'd flagged in week 3, the dosage catch, the dozen quiet interventions that had mattered in ways nobody had attributed to her and that she had not needed attributed to her. She thought about what it meant to be useful in a way that fit the full shape of who you were, not just the part that was easiest to see. I'm going to tell him that I'm a nurse, she said, that this is my floor and these are my patients, and that when something comes up that requires the other thing, the thing that isn't on my badge, I'll be available. She met Danny's eyes. On my terms. Danny held her gaze. Something in his face settled into something she recognized as relief, though he would never call it that. Okay, he said. You should stay, she said. In Chicago, there'll be more of this. He was quiet for a moment. I was going to suggest the same thing. I have no strong attachment to St. Louis. You were bored, she said, profoundly. The corner of his mouth moved. I also still owe you $20. She almost laughed. It came out as something that's smaller, quieter, the thing a laugh is before it's fully ready to be a laugh. We'll settle that later. He nodded. He stayed at the counter for a moment longer, then pushed off and went toward the exit. She watched him go. At 3:45, Marcus's mother arrived. Her name was Diane, and she was small and sharp-eyed, and she walked onto that floor with the specific energy of a woman who had been terrified for 36 hours and was now channeling every ounce of that terror into forward motion. Maya met her at the corridor entrance and walked her to the bay and introduced herself and said that Marcus was stable and recovering well and that he was strong. Diane looked at her. He told me what you did. Maya said nothing. He said you moved him before you even knew for certain. Diane's voice had something in it that was trying to hold itself together and was mostly succeeding. He said you didn't hesitate. He's a good kid, Maya said. He deserves to be okay. Diane looked at her for a long moment with the kind of look that goes past social courtesy and lands somewhere more real. Then she said simply, "Thank you," and walked into her son's bay. Maya stood at the curtain for a moment and listened to the sound of Marcus's voice, still rough, still young, but carrying something it hadn't carried yesterday, something lighter, something that might in time become ordinary and safe. Diane's voice answering him. The particular quiet of a mother and her child in the same room after a night when that had not been guaranteed. She walked back to the floor. Briggs found her at 4:30, 20 minutes before her shift ended. He fell into step beside her without ceremony, and they walked the corridor together in the comfortable silence of two people who have renegotiated their understanding of each other and are still locating the edges of what that means. Rodriguez called the hospital administrator today, he said, formally commended the nursing staff's response to yesterday's incident. He paused. Your name was mentioned specifically. It'll pass, she said. Probably not. He paused again. I submitted a recommendation for your clinical standing review to be fast-tracked. There are senior positions on this floor that you're currently overqualified for. She stopped walking. He stopped a half step later and turned. Why, she said. He looked at her directly, not with the authority he'd been performing for 11 weeks, but with the honesty that had been underneath it the whole time available, if he'd chosen to use it sooner. Because I was wrong about you, and correcting that is my responsibility, not yours. He held her gaze. You belong on this floor, Callahan, at whatever level you want to hold. She looked at him for a moment. Thank you, she said. He nodded once. They walked back to the station. At 4:55, she signed off her charts, gathered her bag, and stood for a moment at the edge of the floor. The ER moved around her the way it always did, urgent and imperfect, and relentlessly, stubbornly alive. Monitors beeping, gurneys rolling, Donna directing traffic at the charge station with 22 years of authority in every syllable. Priya somewhere in the back bays running her own quiet version of excellence. Maya looked at all of it and felt something she recognized after some searching as belonging. Not the belonging of someone who had found a hiding place. The belonging of someone who had found the right work in the right form for the right reasons. Someone who had taken every hard and broken and extraordinary thing that life had made her and had pointed all of it in the direction of keeping people alive. She put her badge in her bag and walked toward the exit. Whatever came next, LaRue's debrief, Solis's exposure, the long and careful aftermath of decisions made in a single extraordinary day, she would meet it from this floor on her terms as herself. Not a ghost pretending to be ordinary, not a soldier hiding in a nurse's uniform. Just Maya Callahan, all of her, all at once. And that finally was enough.